Hello friends, my name is Martinez, and if you are seeing this, it means I did something like a successful readathon. There are a number of reasons that I should not be doing this, or that this isn't a great idea for me or like the right time. Number one is that I suck at readathons. There's no way to really get around that fact. I am not good at making myself read within like prescribed periods of time. Number two is that I suck at TBRs. Or sticking to them, I should say. Number three is that I generally end up really not liking like half of the challenge in the reading rush every year. I like challenges that inspire me or point me in the direction of picking a book. I don't like challenges that dictate how I pick that book or how I read that book. Like those challenges to me, no. So if you just like give me a parameter that I can then direct myself so that I can pick a book, that's a cool challenge. Otherwise, no thank you. And there's always a few in the reading rush that are like, read your book this way, and I don't enjoy that. So my participation has been like scattered through the 5 years that I've been on BookTube. However, my FOMO is always real. And all of these TBRs were coming out and everyone's going to be talking about reading and all this stuff. So I figured that I would start this trying. And if you're seeing this, something went okay. Also, it was great because I was out of work for 3 months and some change, but I actually started my brand new job today. So I'm super excited. When I told you guys that I was unfortunately laid off because of COVID, everybody was super supportive and I appreciate all of your kind words and thoughts. My situation was obviously not unique, but I'm very, very, very happy that things worked out. I landed on my feet and I'm so grateful for that. But this week is like me starting this new job. So lots of training and orientation and stuff. Whereas before I had like hours on end and was literally doing nothing. I'm now back to working 8 hours a day and I figured, you know what? Why not try to read as much as possible? Choices. I'm going to run down through the books that I have picked as a potential TBR. I'm not going to tell you too much about these books here because one, I have a lot of books, and two, I don't even know if these are really the books that I'm going to read, but as I am reading, I will update you with the plot and how I'm feeling about that. And you guys know how reading vlogs work. So first up is the challenge to read a book with a cover that matches your birthstone. And I was born in September. Nobody is surprised to hear that I am a Virgo. So my birthstone is a sapphire. The book that I am probably going to read for this challenge is An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. So I'm rereading this in preparation for reading the second book, which is already out. I really enjoyed this the first time that I read it, and it was one of those books that as soon as I finished reading it, I was like, I really want to reread that, because I felt like a second time around I would get even more from like the themes and the text. But I held off, and now it is time to go back, revisit the story, and then move on to the second book. So I'm excited to do that. The second challenge is to read a book that starts with the word the, and I also have a book that I started but have not finished, and that is The Beautiful by Renee Akpieh. Sam and I buddy read Fate of the Fallen a couple of weeks ago, and when I finished, I think it was inspired by that book that I put a status up on Twitter about like books that were different than how they were pitched to you, because that one was like, what if Sam from Lord of the Rings was the one who had to finish, you know, the mission and Frodo died or whatnot. And that is not at all what that book is. Like, I get where like that could have been the starting inspiration, but what develops is not what I thought I was going to get from that premise. And in that thread about like books that are different than what was pitched, people said that a lot about The Beautiful. This was pitched as like the comeback of vampires, and a lot of people said that this first book was not that at all. And Sam was like, well, why don't we buddy read the Beautiful next? So she's already done with this book and I have been struggling. I'm exactly 100 pages in, and so I'm going to try and get through this. It's not like so bad that I'm like struggling in that regard. I just don't care right now is more of the thing, but I want to push myself through because I want to talk to Sam about it. We started this together. It reads pretty quickly, so I'm confident that I can do it if I can just care. I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but all of these books are books that I currently own that are unread on my shelves. I'm limiting myself to these books and not to ebooks or books that I borrow from the library because I'm right now in a moment of like panic. Panic's not quite the right word, but I'm really feeling uncomfortable with the number of books that I own that I haven't read. This was never me, this was never my collection, and it has just spiraled out of control because of booktube, because of books sent by publishers, which I accept gratefully. Like, I'm not complaining about that, but also I read so much less over the last couple of months that it's just started to pile up in a way that I don't enjoy. And then as through all this, I was thinking, well, if I have to move out of my apartment because I don't have a job, and then I started thinking about how I would have to move all of those books and do something with them. So in general, I want to take stock of my own collection and get some of those books read or unhauled and just have my collection be what it's always been, books that I've read and loved. The next challenge is to read a book that inspired a movie you've already seen. Because I'm sticking to books that I already own, that pretty much meant classics for me. I couldn't really think of anything else that would fit. So the one that I'm leaning towards is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. I've seen, it's not a movie, but I've seen the BBC miniseries adaptation maybe once or twice. It's not one that is in my regular rotation of BBC adaptations, but primarily because I don't have such a strong attachment to the original work. I've never read this, so this is one that could be it. But I also, if I need something a little lighter and smaller, I have Peter Pan. I've never read it. Obviously, I've seen multiple adaptations of it, so this could be like a good break and a quick read. The next one is a challenge I do not like, and it is read the first book you touch. I'm cheating a little bit here. This was the book that was on my bed, like my bedside table sort of reading. I started it last week, so I'm 28 pages in. I didn't get very far, but because this is the one that was like in easy reaching distance nearest me, it's the one I'm slotting into this challenge. It's called Big Friendship: How We Keep Each Other Close, and it is from the host of the podcast Call Your Girlfriend. I'm not familiar with the podcast, but this was my book of the month pick for July, and obviously it's about friendship, and I was like sold by that. And the first 28 pages were just already like I had to stop and show Nicole and send her a little like snippet, like a quote of it, and be like, this is us, so can you read this book too? So I think she's gonna read it too. We might have feelings about this and about friendship in general, so I'm really enjoying this already, and I know this is gonna be one that I'll finish pretty quickly and easily this week. The next one is to read a book completely outside of your house, which again, absolutely not. It's like the middle of summer in Florida, so it's either so hot that you are melting or like a torrential downpour. So being outside right now and also in the middle of a pandemic is not the greatest idea. So I'm interpreting this whatever. I'm Beach Read by Emily Henry, because if I were outside, I would go to the beach. If I could be outside, that's where I would be. I've heard really amazing things. This was my April book of the month pick, and I've heard that this is like heavier than a romance, but the people really love it. Like, I've only heard positive things about this. Next is to read a book in a genre that you've wanted to read more of, and this is not necessarily a genre I want to read more from. Like, I don't read horror, I don't like it, and I don't necessarily want to read more of it, but every once in a while there is a horror book that people are talking about a lot, and my FOMO is just out of control. Like the Rory Power books or the Libba Bray series that everybody talks about, that I just know I will be scared of. And I feel about scary books the same way that I feel about roller coasters, and it's like, why would I want to be scared for fun? That's not fun for me. But I could not say no to Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Marina Garcia, because she is shaping up to be one of my favorite authors of all time. The good news is that the couple of reviews that I've heard from this are from people who do enjoy more horror elements, and they said that this wasn't enough horror for them. So I'm like, yes, perfect for me. Sorry you didn't like it. It's gonna be great. It's more gothic and atmospheric than scary, which is, you know, I love to hear it. So that's on my list as well. And the last challenge is to read a book that takes place in a continent that is different from the one where you are in. I gathered a bunch of books that took this literally, but then I noticed that I had some books, I know this is I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm doing it. So I'm doing fantasy books because, you know, fake worlds kind of count, but specifically I've got a bunch of fantasy books that are inspired by different cultures. So first I have Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and this is Eastern European inspired. It's kind of a take off of Rumpelstiltskin. Next I have Dragon Pearl by Yoon Ha Lee, and this has elements of Korean folklore. So those are all of the books I'll maybe read. I'm so bad at TBRs. I really appreciate you watching this. Let's see how my first week of work goes and how much reading I actually get. I have a feeling that this is a huge adjustment for me to go from like 3+ months of having pretty much nothing to do to like being working and engaged all of the time. So I have a feeling that after each day is done, all I'm going to want to do is to sit on the couch and read. So that's kind of my hope. This morning was rough because my sleep schedule has been like way off, like 3-4 o'clock in the morning to like 12-1 in the afternoon is kind of how I've been sleeping, not by choice, but just that's when I would get tired. So I woke up this morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, and wow, do not recommend. As predicted, one day of work just has like wrecked me a little bit. I had to go to my new office to pick up my work laptop, and they showed me around a little bit. One other person met me and we both had masks on and we were like socially distancing, but she showed me around, and it struck me in that moment how weird it is that I got this job during this time, just in terms of like, I got this job, I was hired, I didn't even see the office at any point. Like I didn't, you know, interact with that space at any point before I was hired. So I walked in and she's like, here's your desk, like where you'll be working. And I was like, I guess that's what I signed up for. It's just so strange because it's a little backwards from any other experience I've had, and I didn't really think about it until I was there physically in that space, and I was like, oh, like this is really where I'm working, even though right now I'm working in my house or whatnot. I did that. I grabbed something to eat on the way back. I ate, and then I did a little bit of editing on a video that should be already up when you see this, hopefully. And it's a video about how I read and rate and review books. This ice cream truck is going to play in the background of this entire section, this whole clip. I have about half of it still to go, but I was kind of falling asleep. So I'm like the new kid at the daycare, like needs a nap. My niece had a birthday today, so I FaceTime with her. We sang her happy birthday. I grabbed my carton of Cherry Garcia Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and I've been sitting here eating ice cream straight out of the carton while I wait for the sun to go down, because I'm literally just waiting for the sun to go down. So I can climb in bed. The good news is that I've been reading, well, in like between shoveling Cherry Garcia into my mouth. I started with An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, and this is a science fiction story about a 23-year-old woman named April May who is walking home one night after working really late, and she comes across this 10-foot statue just like randomly in the middle of New York, and she almost walks past it but has this moment of like, this is a really incredible thing and I almost just walked past it. So she decides to stop. She calls her best friend and they make this quick video and upload it to YouTube about the statue. And when she wakes up the next day, it's gone viral. And it's gone viral because this statue, which she named Carl, hasn't just appeared in New York, but it's popped up all around the world. And by like the fluke happenstance of her being the first one to discover it, to talk about it online, like now they're all calling all of the statues Carl, Carls, and she's found herself in the heart of like this developing mystery and story. I really enjoyed this book the first time around, but I think I'm enjoying even more the narrative voice of this. And I understand why that would be polarizing. This has got such a strong conversational tone, and April May's voice is super developed. So it's something that if you don't jive with or that rubs you the wrong way, like there is no escaping sort of this really strong conversational tone. It is so amazing on audiobook. I've got the book itself, but I also have the audiobook, so I've been kind of reading along with both. But hearing it read out almost feels like the correct way to kind of take the story, because it has that tone and because it feels like I'm listening to April May tell the story, which is the way that this is written. It is written with a little bit of space so that it is April May telling us a story from a future where she already knows things that have happened. So she puts in these commentaries like, that was the last night I got a good night's sleep, or I wish I would have known at this time. So there's a little bit of foresight and removal from the actions that are happening. I'm remembering now too that April May is kind of, you know, I guess a messy character, but only in as much as like any of us is like messy, or like we were all messy at 23, like that kind of thing. That sort of distance between the action and her as a narrator is helpful because she's making bad choices, but there is some recognition there of like, okay, here's me making another bad choice, but at the moment, like I didn't know how to deal with it, or it felt right, or I didn't know. And so it gives me a little bit more like sympathy for her doing the things that I'm like, girl, stop. So I really appreciated that. The other thing that I'm really enjoying and like reading back again, like knowing to keep an eye out for this, is obviously that Hank Green wrote this, and Hank Green has been on YouTube forever, and he's somebody who obviously knows a lot about engaging with an audience that was built on YouTube or like viral videos and things of that nature. So it has a lot of commentary about sort of an audience, a responsibility to an audience, but also like April May herself becomes like a brand, and so she's no longer just April May herself. She has to think about who April May the brand is. So there's so much commentary about that, about engaging with other people online, that is just brilliant, and I really love it. And I find myself like marking up things even more than my first time read. So this is going really quickly, and I'm just gonna keep reading till the sun goes down, and then I'm gonna dive into bed until I have to wake up and work again tomorrow. I'm currently at page 107. I'd like to get another 100 pages in, but it's really a race against the sun going down at this point. I'm sitting on the floor because I had training all morning and I just needed to get out of that stupid chair. Not that anybody really wants to know about my chair, but I have this like crappy rinky-dink chair because I only use this desk occasionally, but now that I'm working from home, I'm gonna need a better chair. Last night, after I updated and said that I wanted to read another like 100 pages, it really sunk in that if I want to read 7 books this week, that I should make a little bit more effort. So I stayed up longer than after the sun went down, and I finished reading an absolutely remarkable thing. I gave this 4 stars originally, but this is definitely a book that felt even better to me on reread, and specifically because I feel like after the first time, like the first time reading this taught me how to read this book. When you hear the premise of this book and it's talking about these like giant sculptures in the Carls and how they mysteriously appeared, I think the assumption, or at least my assumption, was that this was going to be like a heavier mystery sort of book. And while reading, like I was very interested in the Carls, and you know, that was kind of always in the background of like, what even are these things? And there's almost like gameplay feature as they're trying to figure out what the Carls are. And so I think that if your eye is drawn too much to that, there isn't like a big payoff there in terms of the first book, and the mystery aspect of it is almost not the point. This is such a character driven story, and so reading it the second time I really felt like I was better able to appreciate the character work and just kind of unfocus from the Carl mystery aspect of it, even though it was still really fun to read the second time around. In my original review, I also mentioned how some of the side characters felt a little bit underdeveloped compared to April May, but even then I felt that that was understandable. One, because April May has such a heavy presence in this story, and it really is her story from her perspective and point of view, and you definitely see that bias in her storytelling. And because one of April May's like main flaws is being selfish or self-centered in a certain way and sabotaging her relationships and just kind of having a narrow view of things, you can see how that kind of paints the characters that are around her in a way that I ultimately was able to forgive. Like, I don't want to over credit, you know, like this was purposeful, but I think it was purposeful at least in the respect that if you are dedicating so much time and putting so much importance on a single character, and one whose flaw is being very self-centered, it only makes sense that sort of the characters that are around her are less developed or seen less complexly. I really enjoyed the story. I just have fun reading it. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Like, every time I read this, I'm gonna bump it up a star, and I know that I'm always very like mindful of how rereading isn't a common experience and a book shouldn't, you know, have to be consumed multiple times, but when it is, it does inform my overall experience. And like I said, rereading can really kind of teach you how to read that book. I realized that I talk about picking up the second book, but I didn't include it in my TBR, so it's in there, I guess. I kind of want to give myself a day of space before starting the second book. I have The Beautiful here next to me today, as well as Beach Read, as well as Big Friendship, because I haven't really decided what's next, but one of these is next. If you're wondering how it's going for me falling asleep on time and waking up at reasonable hours, not great. And today, especially not great because it's been raining and gray and gloomy all morning. Just perfect to stay on this couch, but I can't. But I do have an update for you. I read another whole book last night. I'm like really proud of myself. Even if this like reading vlog ended here, I finished reading Beach Read all in one sitting. I really enjoyed this. It's funny because I had heard from people that, you know, this isn't like a regular romance, it's a sad romance. I mean, what people were saying is that it was heavier than they expected. And so I don't know if hearing that over and over again like over prepared me. And this definitely has heavier elements, not to belittle that. It deals with death of a parent and cancer and child abuse in the past, and they even interview like a death cult. So there are darker or sadder elements here that the characters are dealing with. However, it doesn't feel that much different from other romances that I've read where the two main characters are dealing with similar issues. So the entire thing in a romance story is why can't these two people be together, or what is kind of standing in their way, or what are the obstacles in their journey while they're falling in love. And a lot of times the answer to that question is some sort of like trauma in the past or something that the character is dealing with in the present that is a more difficult topic. So I guess in trying to correct for what other people said I should expect, I feel like I overcorrected and I should have just expected like a romance where two people are dealing with more difficult topics. So that's what this was. And again, not to say anything bad about the book because I really enjoyed it. Emily Henry wrote one of my favorite books of all time that I want to reread soon. And I kind of want to get to her whole body of her work because I've heard such mixed things about her books. But this was delightful. And she writes in a really sharp manner. She has these really beautiful descriptions and she captures emotions well. And then the banter between the two characters, the dialogue was just spot on, and I laughed, you know, along with them. I loved January. I loved her sort of wit and just how her emotions were bubbling up all the time. I felt for her. I understood her thoughts and her reasonings, and Gus was a wonderful leading man as well. He kind of had that grumpy edge that I enjoy, but ultimately he was somebody who was sensitive, he was kind to her, he was trying to do right by her, so it's the perfect balance of those two things. I think I'm going to give this 4.5 out of 5 stars. I haven't really figured out if that's fair. that's like my feeling, is that this is a 4.5 star read, but I haven't thought about it more deeply since when I finished this at midnight last night about why I am feeling like I'm docking half a star. I don't know. I just kind of have to sit with it a little bit longer, but that's kind of my initial reaction. Really enjoyable, highly recommend, would reread, and now I'm 2 books in, you guys. What the heck? After I finished reading that, I took another little bit to kind of consider my TBR and see what I was feeling like I wanted to read next, and nothing was really calling out to me in terms of like the TBR that I put together. And then I remembered that I have a book out from the library, and I know that my whole thing was that I was going to read like physical books on my TBR, but I started reading this and I got sucked in, and I'm 80 pages into this book now. So basically, recently I read We Are Not From Here by Torres Sanchez, and I actually got this as an advanced listener copy from Libro FM. I picked this and I haven't heard a lot about it kind of elsewhere. It's the story of 3 teens who basically leave their home in Guatemala to migrate to the United States, and they are basically forced to leave their home because of different reasons and kind of the violence that is taking hold in their town. They have to leave their family, and they have to do this trip. And so one of the ways that migrants come through Mexico to the US border is by riding this train. It's called La Bestia, or the Beast, and it is incredibly dangerous. And the trip in general through Mexico is dangerous because people take advantage of migrants and they are in a precarious situation as it is. And so we follow the story of these 3 teens who embark on this journey and all of the things that they have to face on the way to the US, and then when they get there, kind of the welcome that they get at the US border. So it is a book that is incredibly heavy. It deals with child abuse and violence and rape and kids in cages, gun violence, death of parent. So there's a ton of content in here to be careful of, but it is an incredibly impactful and moving story. And I just, you know, you hear about these things in a way that is like on the news, and so it's like 10-second clips, and you know, you hear about the caravans and the kids in the cages and the border and whatnot, but I don't think that I ever really stopped to consider kind of the plight of a migrant until this book grounded it in the perspective of these 3 kids, asking what it would take for them to leave their homes and what they would face and what they would be willing to face in order to survive and to have a chance to survive. Because I read this and it really impacted me, I went on to check out this nonfiction book called The Beast, and it is a nonfiction account from a journalist who basically rode the rails multiple times, interviewed people along the way, stopped in different Mexican cities to talk to people in charge about the things that were happening to migrants, including kidnapping, the violence, and women being sold into sex trafficking and things of that nature. So it is really showing me, I think I gave this 4 stars when I finished, and a piece of that is the introduction. It just has to do with like the writing and how she establishes characters. It was a little bit repetitive at the beginning. The pace was like slow in the beginning and then almost frenetic at the end. But reading the nonfiction piece of this is giving me so much more of an appreciation for all of the details that Torres Sanchez wove into this, and how realistic she made this fictional account. Even though, you know, you understand that these are not real characters, the way that she infused them with the motivations are just, you know, very, very similar to what this journalist discovered while interviewing migrants himself. So they are 2 things that I would recommend kind of reading together. There are 2 things that I'm like super invested in right now. So I think I'm going to finish reading The Beast, even though it's not a physical book. It's one I have from the library. I'm breaking my own rules, but I'm into it, and that's the most important thing. And it does start with the, so it meets one of the challenges. Hello, so I spent today, I did like my reading update this morning and a few other updates, and I worked today, and then after work I sat down and figured I would get a jump start on editing this vlog. And I at this point it's Thursday and I have like, I don't know, the video this long, and so I thought I would just do like one giant vlog, but I'm feeling like it would actually turn into like an hour-and-a-half documentary. So I've decided to cut this into 2 parts and just save my updates from today for the start of the next vlog, and say that this was my reading rush vlog for the first 3 days. I will go into details about this in the next part of this vlog, but I ended up finishing last night by starting A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor. If you are keeping score at home, that was also not on my original TBR, but I read 90 pages of that last night and another 10 pages of The Beast before I fell asleep. So I finished 2 books, and I will put my total page count. This is for 3 days, so I should have finished 3 books, but I feel okay because I'm a good chunk into The Beast, and I have got a good chunk of A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor done and done. So if I can just do a little bit of catch up today or across the weekend, I'll be on a good track. I'm really bad apparently at gauging how much material I have, and I always feel like I'm not updating enough. And then I sit down and I'm like, it's fine that you're not updating enough because you talk a lot, madam. You have a lot of feelings. So thank you for joining me for these first 3 days and listening to all of my feelings and me just being a tired wreck after having to go back to work like on a normal schedule. Today I'm obviously feeling a lot better, and tomorrow I actually don't work. I will be with my family, so I will let you guys know all about that and talk a little bit more about that on this next part, and I will see you guys then. I legitimately finished, like I like stopped recording, but I forgot that I have a channel and a sign off. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.